Imagine walking through an ancient, dusty library and finding a heavy, iron-bound book tucked away in the darkest corner. When you open it, the pages aren't filled with the Sunday school stories of rainbows and peaceful pastures you remember. Instead, you find accounts of shadows, ancient declarations of woe, and moments where the very earth seemed to turn against those who walked upon it. These are the cursed stories of the Bible, the parts of the text that make even the most seasoned scholars pause. We are talking about spiritual consequences that lasted for generations, cities that vanished in a heartbeat, and individuals who found themselves on the wrong side of a divine decree. Today, we are pulling back the veil on these difficult narratives. We aren't just looking at the what happened. We are diving deep into the why and the how these ancient warnings still echo through the halls of history. If you've ever wondered about the darker, more mysterious side of the scriptures, you are in the right place because we are about to explain every major cursed story ever recorded in the Word. To understand the concept of a curse in the biblical sense, we have to start at the very beginning, in the Garden of Eden. This is the foundational cursed story that sets the stage for everything else. Most people focus on the forbidden fruit, but the real impact was the pronouncement that followed. When the first pair stepped outside the boundaries of trust, the environment itself shifted. The ground, which had previously yielded abundance without effort, was suddenly described as producing thorns and thistles. The very dirt became a source of toil. This wasn't just a punishment. It was a fundamental change in the relationship between humanity and the physical world. It established a pattern we see throughout the Bible. When spiritual harmony is broken, the physical reality reflects that fracture. The curse of the ground meant that life would now be a struggle of sweat and labor, a constant reminder of the distance between the ideal and the reality. But as we move further into the book of Genesis, we encounter the story of Cain. After the incident with his brother, Cain didn't just receive a lecture. He received a specific, personal mark and a decree of wandering. The earth, which had witnessed the first act of human-on-human violence, this created the curse of the vagabond. Cain was destined to be a restless wanderer, never able to find a true home or a place of peace. This story is fascinating because it introduces the idea of a mark that protected him from others while simultaneously setting him apart. It's a complex layer of mercy mixed with a heavy spiritual weight. For centuries, people have speculated on what that mark was, but the real curse was the isolation, the inability to ever truly belong to a community or the land again. Then we have the curse of Canaan, a story that has been misunderstood and misapplied for centuries. After the Great Flood, Noah's son Ham showed a profound lack of respect toward his father. In response, Noah pronounced a decree not directly on Ham, but on Ham's son Canaan. This was a curse of servitude. Historically, this text was twisted by later generations to justify horrific social structures, but in its original context, it was a prophetic warning about the future of a specific tribe. It showed how the lack of honor in one generation could create a spiritual ripple effect that impacted the destiny of those who followed. It's a sobering look at the weight of parental legacy and the idea that our private choices can have public, long-lasting consequences for our descendants. Let's shift our gaze to the city of Jericho. This is one of the most famous conquest stories in the Bible, but it carries a very specific, cursed foundation. After the walls came down, Joshua stood before the ruins and issued a chilling warning. He declared that anyone who tried to rebuild the city of Jericho would do so at the cost of their oldest and youngest children. For 500 years, the ruins sat there, undisturbed. People were terrified of that decree. But in the days of the kings, a man named Hiel of Bethel decided the strategic location was too good to pass up. He ignored the ancient warning and started the construction. The Bible records that just as Joshua had said, he lost his firstborn when he laid the foundation and his youngest when he set up the gates. This story serves as a reminder that in the biblical narrative, time does not dilute a spiritual decree. 5 centuries felt like a long time to a human, but to the spiritual law, the words were as fresh as the day they were spoken. While we are on the topic of cities, we have to talk about Sodom and Gomorrah. This isn't just a story of a city being removed. It's a story of a curse of salt and sulfur. The description of the aftermath is a landscape that was permanently altered. It became a dead zone where nothing could grow, a literal scar on the face of the earth. The curse here was the total removal of a civilization's future. In the biblical view, these cities became the ultimate symbol of what happens when a society completely detaches itself from the values of hospitality and justice. They weren't just removed, they were turned into an everlasting example, a visual prophecy of the consequences of absolute moral collapse. Now let's look at a more individual and perhaps more confusing story, the curse of the Gibeonites. During the time of the conquest, the Gibeonites tricked the leaders of Israel into a peace treaty by pretending to be from a far-off land. Even though they used deception, the leaders made a vow in the name of the Creator to protect them. Centuries later, King Saul, in a fit of misplaced zeal, ignored that ancient vow and tried to eliminate the Gibeonites. This triggered a curse of famine on the entire land of Israel for 3 years. It didn't matter that Saul was the king or that the Gibeonites had originally lied. The broken vow carried a weight that affected the weather and the crops for everyone. It wasn't until King David realized the source of the trouble and made things right with the remnant of the Gibeonites that the rains returned. This story teaches the gravity of the oath curse. The idea that keeping one's word is a spiritual necessity and breaking it can have environmental consequences. Moving into the transition between empires, we encounter the strange and terrifying story of the curse of Elisha and the bears. This is one of those passages that makes people scratch their heads. A group of youths comes out and mocks the prophet Elisha, shouting, "Go up, you bald head." In response, Elisha pronounces a curse in the name of the Lord, and 2 bears emerge from the woods to attack them. On the surface, it seems like an extreme overreaction to a playground insult. But scholars point out that in the original language, this wasn't a group of small children. It was a large mob of young men, essentially a gang, challenging the authority of the prophet in a very dangerous way. The curse was a divine protection of the prophetic office. It established a boundary of reverence that was not to be crossed, especially during a time when the nation was sliding into deep spiritual confusion. We also have to discuss the curse of Gehazi. Gehazi was the servant of Elisha, a man who saw miracles every day. When the great Syrian general Naaman was cured of his skin condition, Elisha refused to take any payment. But Gehazi saw an opportunity for profit. He chased down the general, lied to get silver and fine clothes, and hid them in his house. When he returned, Elisha saw through the lie and declared that the skin condition of Naaman would now cling to Gehazi and his descendants forever. This is the curse of greed. It shows that trying to profit from the free gifts of the Spirit carries a heavy price. Gehazi wanted the general's wealth and ended up with the general's burden. It's a classic example of the exchange that often happens in cursed stories. You get what you want, but it comes with a weight you didn't bargain for. Then there is the curse of the fig tree in the New Testament. This is one of the few times we see the Messiah use a curse. He is walking to Jerusalem, feels hungry, and sees a fig tree in full leaf. But when he approaches it, there is no fruit. He says, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And by the next morning, the tree is withered to its roots. This was a prophetic object lesson. In the ancient world, a fig tree and leaf was supposed to have fruit. The leaves were a promise. By cursing the tree, he was issuing a warning to a religious system that had all the leaves of ritual and tradition, but none of the fruit of justice and mercy. The withered tree was a visual curse upon hypocrisy. It showed that appearances without substance are destined for removal. Let's talk about the curse of the 30 pieces of silver. This is the money paid to Judas for his betrayal. When Judas realized what he had done, he tried to return the money, but the priests wouldn't take it back because it was blood money. They used it to buy a field called the Potter's Field, also known as the Field of Blood. This created a curse of ancient prophecy being fulfilled. The field became a place for the burial of strangers, a desolate piece of land that carried the stain of the greatest betrayal in history. And the land purchased with it became a permanent memorial to a broken trust. It shows how wealth obtained through dishonor carries a spiritual rot that makes it impossible to enjoy. One of the most intense curse stories involves the curse of Ananias and Sapphira in the early church. In a community where everyone was sharing everything, this couple sold a piece of land but kept back part of the price while pretending they had given the whole amount. This wasn't just about the money. It was about bringing deception into a space that was supposed to be built on absolute truth. They were removed from the living on the spot. This was a curse of purity. It served as a terrifying warning to the early believers that you cannot play games with the spirit of truth. It established a level of reverence for the community of faith that was based on more than just good vibes. It was based on the reality of divine presence. We also have to consider the curse of Jezebel. Her name has become synonymous with manipulation and spiritual rebellion. The prophecy against her was that she would meet her end in a specific way and her line would be completely removed. The curse here was the total erasure of a legacy. For all her power, wealth, and influence, she ended up with nothing. No burial, no monument, and no descendants to carry on her name. In the biblical narrative, this is the ultimate curse. For a culture that valued lineage above almost everything else, it showed that power built on cruelty is a house built on sand. Now, let's look at a story from the journey in the wilderness. The curse of the fiery serpents. As the people complained and turned their hearts back toward Egypt, they found themselves in a landscape filled with venomous snakes. Many people suffered as a result. The curse was a physical manifestation of their internal spiritual state. Their words were poisonous, and so their environment became poisonous. But this story is unique because it also provides the antidote. They were told to look at a bronze serpent on a pole to be restored. This shows that in the Bible, a curse is often a call to look back toward the source of life. It's a disciplinary measure intended to turn the heart back home. Then there is the curse of Korah's rebellion. Korah and a group of leaders challenged the leadership of Moses and Aaron, claiming that everyone was equally holy and they didn't need a specific hierarchy. This wasn't just a political disagreement. It was a challenge to the divine order. The earth literally opened up and swallowed the tents of the rebels. This curse of the abyss was a dramatic demonstration that some boundaries are not to be crossed. It showed that spiritual authority wasn't something to be seized by force or popularity, but something that carried a gravity that could literally move the earth beneath your feet. We can't forget the curse of the 7 bowls in the book of Revelation. These are the final curses of the end times. They describe the seas turning to blood, the sun scorching people with fire, and the darkness falling over the seed of the beast. These aren't just random acts of destruction. They are the harvest of choice. The world is depicted as reaping exactly what it has sown. The curses are the final results of a planet that has consistently rejected the light. It's the ultimate cursed story because it involves the entire creation. But even here, the text suggests that these events are meant to provoke a final moment of realization, a last chance to turn away from the shadows. What about the curse of Eli's house? Eli was a priest who was a good man personally, but he refused to restrain his sons who were using their position to exploit the people. The prophecy against Eli was that no one in his family would ever reach old age again. This curse of the shortened life followed his descendants for generations. It's a tragic story because it highlights the curse of negligent leadership. It wasn't that Eli did something terrible himself. It was that he did nothing when he should have done something. In the biblical economy, silence in the face of wrongdoing can be just as heavy as the wrongdoing itself. Then there is the curse of the handwriting on the wall. King Belshazzar was having a massive party and decided to use the holy gold vessels from the Temple of Jerusalem to drink wine while praising his idols. Suddenly, a detached human hand appeared and started writing on the plaster of the wall. The message was Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin, which translated to, "You have been weighed in the balance and found wanting." This was a curse of final judgment for a regime. That very night, the city was taken and the empire changed hands. It shows that there is a limit of patience, a point where the spiritual scales tip and the opportunity for change is gone. Let's look at the curse of Balaam's donkey. Balaam was a prophet for hire who was offered a massive amount of money to curse the people of Israel. Every time he tried to speak a curse, only blessings came out. He even had a conversation with his own donkey after it saw an angel of the Lord blocking their path. This story is an interrupted curse. It shows that a divine proclamation of blessing cannot be overturned by human words, no matter how much people are willing to pay for it. The real curse ended up failing because the source of the blessing was greater than the prophet's ambition. It's a humorous but powerful lesson that you can't buy a divine decree. There is also the curse of Zechariah. In the New Testament, Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist, was told by an angel that he would have a son in his old age. Because he doubted the message and asked for a sign, he was struck silent until the child was born. This was a curse of silence. It wasn't a punishment meant to destroy him, but a mandatory quiet time to allow the miracle to happen without his doubt interfering. It shows how sometimes a curse is actually a form of spiritual recalibration, forcing us to listen when we've spent too much time talking. We can't leave out the curse of the Tower of Babel. Humanity decided to build a tower to the heavens to make a name for themselves. They wanted to create a centralized power that ignored the divine. The response was the confusion of languages and the scattering of the people. This was the curse of division. It's fascinating because it suggests that global unity based on human ego is seen as a dangerous thing. The confusion of tongues was a way to prevent a unified rebellion. It's a story that explains why we have so many different cultures and languages today. It's a lingering ripple from an ancient attempt to bypass the Creator. The Bible says that an evil spirit from the Lord troubled him. This was a curse of a disturbed mind. It shows that when we consistently act against what we know is right and deeply unhappy, his curse was the loss of his own center. It serves as a warning that our external successes mean nothing if we have an internal storm that we can't quiet. But let's talk about the most significant aspect of these stories, the curse that was taken. In the New Testament, there is a verse that says, "Cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree." This refers to the belief that the Messiah took the curse of the world upon himself. This is the grand finale of all cursed stories. The idea is that all the thorns, the toil, the diseases, the isolation, and the spiritual weight we've been discussing were funneled into a single moment in time. This flips the script on every other story we've told. Instead of a curse being a final sentence, it becomes a shadow that can be lifted. This brings us to the curse of the law mentioned in the letters of Paul. He argues that trying to be perfect through our own effort is a curse because we can never actually do it. It's like being on a treadmill that never stops and only gets faster. The curse is the frustration of never being good enough. The solution, according to the text, is to stop trying to earn the blessing and simply receive it. It's a radical shift from the ancient stories of, "If you do this, you are cursed," to the new story of, "It has been taken, so you are free." Why do these stories exist in the Bible at all? Why not just fill the book with encouragement? Because history is messy, and human choices have consequences. These cursed stories are the warning signs on the highway of life. They tell us where the bridge is out, where the ice is thin, and where the road turns into a cliff. They aren't there to make us live in fear, but to make us live in awareness. They show us that the universe has a moral arc and that our choices resonate beyond the moment they are made. When we look at the curse of the earth at the beginning and the no more curse in the book of Revelation at the end, we see the complete story arc of the Bible. It's a movement from a fractured world to a restored one. The cursed stories are the tension in the middle of the narrative. They provide the contrast that makes the blessing mean something. Without understanding the gravity of the shadows, we can't truly appreciate the brilliance of the light. Think about the curse of Gehazi for a second. It wasn't just about his skin, it was about his legacy. He lost the opportunity to succeed a great prophet because he wanted a few suits of clothes and some silver. He traded the eternal for the temporary. That is the core theme of almost every cursed story in the Bible. A bad trade. Cain traded his peace for a moment of anger. Esau traded his birthright for a bowl of soup. Judas traded his soul for 30 coins. The curse is simply the reality of having to live with the deal you made. The story of the curse of the Israelites in the wilderness, where they had to wander for 40 years, is another great example. They were standing at the edge of the promised land. They still got to where they were going eventually, but they had to take the long way around. Half of them didn't make it at all. It's a curse of lost time. It tells us that while we can be restored, we can't always get back the years we spent running in the wrong direction. As we conclude this deep dive into the cursed stories of the Bible, it's important to see the balance. For every curse mentioned, there is a pathway provided for restoration. For every city that fell, there is a city described that will never fall. For every individual who is marked by their choices, there is an invitation to be marked by grace. The Bible uses these dark stories to highlight a very simple truth. The world is a place of absolute consequence, but it is also a place of absolute compassion. These stories have survived for thousands of years because they speak to something deep within us. We know what it feels like to have a cloud over our lives. We know what it feels like to live with the consequences of a bad decision. These ancient texts give words to those experiences. They show us that even in the middle of a cursed situation, there is a language of hope and a possibility of a new beginning. So, the next time you encounter one of these difficult passages, don't just skip it. Look at the warning it provides. Look at the boundary it establishes. And most importantly, look at the way it points toward the need for a solution. The cursed stories aren't the end of the book. They are the reasons the book was written in the first place. They are the shadows that prove the existence of the sun. Understanding them doesn't just make us better at history, it makes us better at navigating our own lives. The warnings are there for a reason. The heritage is ancient, and the wisdom is timeless. The vault is open, the stories are explained, and the weight of the past is a guide for the future. Stay aware, stay rooted in the light, And remember that even the darkest story is only a chapter in a much larger book of restoration. Thank you for staying with me through this intense exploration. It's a journey that reveals as much about us today as it does about the people of the distant past.